All right, here we are. We're back with the Old Testament study Sunday night. So it's time for Ruth chapter 2. And just a quick recap last week. Naomi is the daughter-in-law of Ruth. They've both lost their husbands down in the land of the Moabites, land of Moab. And finally the famine hits down there and they come back home. And they come back to Bethlehem because things are good. The famine drove them down there to start with. But as life goes on, it's just these two ladies that come back. So Naomi, being the mother-in-law to her widowed daughter-in-law, they've come back to Bethlehem. And that's where they're living at, but they're poor. They've just come from a strange land. So one of the ways in the Old Testament that God provided for the poor was when somebody was working their field in the harvest, that the poor folks could follow along behind and pick up the stuff that the workers dropped and left. Even today with all the modern equipment we got, the harvest is not 100%. That's why guys like to go dove hunting. There's corn spills all over the field and the doves come in everywhere. But back then it was the poor people going to pick up anything that was left behind. They would live off of that. So that kind of sets the context for where we're at here tonight in chapter 2 of the story of Ruth. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's who was a mighty man of wealth. So she does have kinfolk over here, Naomi does. And he was a wealthy guy. He owns a big farm himself. And he's a godly man. He's a wealthy man. Remember, it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. It's not money that's bad. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. It's a tool, if you would. So he's a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech. And her kinsman's name was Boaz. So remember Boaz. And Ruth, the Moabitess, said to Naomi, her mother-in-law, says, let me go to the field and glean. That's what it's called in the King James Version. They're going to go pick up what's the leftovers in the field. It's called gleaning the field. Glean the ears of corn after him in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said to her, go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And this King James 16:11. Now, her hap was to light on a part of the field, or hap is old English. We use words like happenstance, or it just happened to be that she picked out a field that belonged to Boaz. She didn't know this and didn't plan it. God knew it. God planned it. I believe that's called providence. But to her, it was just happenstance that she ends up here. Her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was a kindred of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. Now remember, we're reading about the ancestors of Jesus. Boaz and Ruth are in his family tree way back there. And here we see him in Bethlehem. That's why Jesus, Joseph and Mary had to go back to Bethlehem, the city of the ancestry, and register for the census. That's why Jesus was born in Bethlehem. All this is God's providence setting up hundreds of years before in it. So behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers, so he owns the farm, the guys are out there working for him, harvesting the crop. And this says something about the heart of Boaz when we first meet him here. He goes out there and he sees the reapers that are out there. And he says to them, the Lord be with you. And they answer to him, say, and the Lord with you. The Lord bless thee. Then said Boaz to his servant, who was set over the reapers, some folks might call him the straw boss, who's that little girl over there? Whose damsel's that one following behind back there picking stuff up? And the servant that was set over the reapers answered and starts to explain, said, that's that Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And the guy was explaining, says, she said, I pray thee, or I beg you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and hath continued even from morning till now, except she tarried a little in the house. She took a little time of rest, but she's been working all day long. So then said Boaz to Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter? Or listen to me. we could translate. He tells Ruth, Boaz tells Ruth, son, you listen to me. Don't you go glean in some other field. Neither go from hence. Just stay here and stay here with my maidens that are out there gleaning too. Says, I'm going to watch over you and protect you. It might not be safe for you to go glean in some other field. You stay here. I think she's already caught his eye, don't you? And let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. And Boaz told her, said, I've charged the young men that they'll not touch thee. They'll watch over you. And when you're thirsty, go drink out of our water buckets, out of our vessels. Drink of that which the young men have drawn. He's going overboard with her, ain't he? Then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground, because she knew that he has been especially kind to her, and said unto him, why have I found grace in your eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, saying, I'm a stranger. I'm one of them Moabites, and everybody treats me like a stranger, like I'm not from around here. And Boaz answered and said unto her, because I've heard about you. It's fully been showed to me all that thou hast done to your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I know about you, and how you left your father and your mother in the land of your nativity, and you've come into a people which thou knewest not before. He says, may the Lord recompense your work. Oh, the Lord bless you for what all you've done. And a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. He had heard that, hey, she's a Moabitish woman, but she's told her mother-in-law that your people be my people and your God's going to be my God. And Boaz is impressed by that. He says, hey, I know you're trusting in the God of Israel. Then she said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for thou hast comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly to your handmaid. Thanks for being friendly to me. He says, though I be not like one of your handmaidens, I'm not from around here, but you still treated me like I'm somebody friendly. And Boaz said unto her, now at mealtime you come and eat with us. You come hither, eat of the bread and dip your morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers. And Boaz shared some of his lunch with her. He reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and she was satisfied, sufficed, and left. And when she was risen up to go back to work, go glean, Boaz commended his young men, saying, one's working for him now, he says, now, let her glean even among the sheaves, because what would happen, see, if the workers were going through gleaning, there was probably a tendency of some of the poor folks that God had given the right to go out there and pick up the leftovers. Just human nature, some of them would have been trying to get on up there where the good stuff was and getting in front of the workers, and you'd have to rebuke them, right? So Boaz says, don't rebuke her, even if she gets up among the fresh sheaves. Says, let her get what she wants. And reproach her not, verse 16. And on top of that even, going the extra mile, he tells his men, said, drop some handfuls on purpose for her. Let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them that she may glean them, and rebuke her not now. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out that she had gleaned. She took the wheat homes, what it was, and she beat out and began to make some dough and stuff. And it was about an ephah of barley, whatever that was. I think of it as in bushels. But she took it up. She had enough to go home and make some bread. She took it up and went to the city. And her mother-in-law, Naomi, was there, saw what she had gleaned. And she brought forth and gave to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed, what she had left. And her mother-in-law said unto her, where hast thou gleaned today, and where wroughtest thou? Where did you work at? Because you did good. You've brought a lot home. Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, the man's name with whom I work today is a man named Boaz. Now Naomi, I'm sure her face lit up. She said, Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, well, blessed be he of the Lord, who's not left off his kindness to the living and the dead. I know God's in this. And Naomi said unto her, that man is near of kin to us, one of our next kinsmen. Now Boaz wasn't blood kin to Ruth. He was blood kin to her mother-in-law, Naomi, right? But here's the principle playing out in a living illustration in the Bible of the Old Testament law about the kinsman redeemer. Like Boaz is the kinsman who's going to take care of it. God set it up for widows and things to take care of them like that. And it's like family. And the principle blows up bigger in a spiritual way. That what's really behind the book of Ruth is it's explaining about Jesus, the descendant of Boaz and Ruth. But in Jesus, God became our kinsman redeemer. He became one of us, like unto us, yet without sin, to rescue us when we had no hope. And Ruth the Moabitess said, He said unto me also, you'll keep fast, stay by my young men until they've ended all my harvest. You work with them till the end here. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, said, that's good. It's good, my daughter, that they'll go out with his maidens, that they meet thee not in any other field. It's good. You'll be safe there. You do what he said. You stay with his maidens, and you stay there in his field just like he said. So she, being Ruth, she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean to the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. I guess it's halfway through the book. We'll pick back up next week.